obliged to jump overboard and push off the ship with poles, and afterwards were repeatedly compelled to drag it for half an hour together through shallow places. These people are also very expert at climbing. They could ascend without ratlines to the very tops of the slanting masts, and take in or unloose the sails. I could not repress a shudder on seeing these poor creatures hanging betwixt earth and heaven, so far above me that they appeared like dwarfs. They work with one hand, while they cling to the mast with the other. I do not think that a better or more active, agile, and temperate race of sailors exists than these. Their fare consists of bread or ship biscuit in the morning, with sometimes a raw cucumber, a piece of cheese, or a handful of dates in addition. For dinner they have the same diet, and for supper they have a dish of warm beans, or a kind of broth or pilau. Roast mutton is a rare delicacy with them, and their drink is nothing but Nile water. During the period of the inundation the river is twice as full of vessels as at other times. When the river is swollen, the only method of communication is by boats. On the last day of this expedition a most beauteous spectacle awaited me. The Delta! Here the mighty Nile, which irrigates the whole country with the hundreds of canals cut from its banks through every region, divides itself into two principal branches, one of which falls into the sea at Rosetta, and the other at Damietta. If the separate arms of the river could be compared to seas, how much more does its united vastness merit the appellation! When I was thus carried away by the beauty and grandeur of nature, when I thus saw myself placed in the midst of a new and interesting scenes, it would appear to me incredible how people can exist, possessing in abundance the gifts of riches, health, and leisure time, and yet without a taste for travelling. The petty comforts of life and enjoyments of luxury are indeed worth more in the eyes of some than the opportunity of contemplating the exalted beauties of nature, or the monuments of history, and of gaining information concerning the manners and customs of foreign nations. Although I was at times very badly situated, and had to encounter more hardships and disagreeables than fall to the lot of many a man, I would be thankful that I had had resolution given me to continue my wanderings whenever one of these grand spectacles opened itself before me. What, indeed, are the entertainments of a large town compared to the delta of the Nile and many similar scenes? The pure and perfect enjoyment afforded by the contemplation of the beauty of nature is not for a moment to be found in the ball-room or the theatre, and all the ease and luxury in the world should not buy from me my recollections of this journey. Not far from the Delta we can behold the Libyan desert, of which we afterwards never entirely lose sight, though we sometimes approach and sometimes recede from it. I became conscious of certain dark objects in the far distance; they developed themselves more and more, and at length I recognized in them the wonder buildings of ancient times, the pyramids; far behind them rises the chain of mountains, or rather hills, the Makatam. Evening was closing in when we at length arrived at Baluch, the harbour of Cairo. If we could have landed at once, I might, perhaps, have reached the town itself this evening. As the harbour is, however, always overcrowded with vessels, the captain is often compelled to wait for an hour before he can find a place to moor his craft. By the time I could disembark, it had already grown quite dark, and the town gates were shut. I was thus obliged to pass the night on board. The journey from Atfe to Cairo had occupied 2 days and a half. This passage had been one of the most interesting, although the heat became more and more oppressive, and the burning winds of the desert were sometimes wafted over to us. The highest temperature at midday was 36 degrees, and in the shade from 24 degrees to 25 degrees Reaumur. The sky was far less beautiful and clear than in Syria; it was here frequently overcast with white clouds. Section 28.